Welcome to Two Lit Ladies, the podcast. The Two Lit Ladies, Dr. Katherine McKnight and Deanna Gallagher, are literacy experts and educators who specialize in developing reading, writing, and literacy skills for all students. Thank you for tuning in.
Hi, welcome to Two Lit Ladies podcast, and I am Katherine McKnight, and
I'm Deanna Gallagher.
And today we're going to talk about STEM, STEAM. STEAM plus R equals stream, and we're really going to talk about what that R is, that mysterious R in stream. And so I'm going to turn it over to my fellow lit lady, Deanna Gallagher, and we're going to talk about, what STEM, STEAM, stream actually is, right? First.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Katie and I have been talking about this for a while, and we've decided that it's time for us to present our argument to you as teachers, as people who are professionals in education, and see what you think of it. We'd like to propose that the next educational movement incorporates and supports reading, voluntary, self-selected, research and information-seeking reading done by students in the classroom and beyond as a fundamental component of the STEM and STEAM movements in education. Now, we have, of course, been tossing around these terms STEM and STEAM as if you know them, and we presume that if you are a teacher or if you are a parent, that you have at least been exposed to what these acronyms are and what they stand for.
And, we think it's really important to clarify definitions because there's so many definitions, so mmany movements that are out there in education that we probably want to clarify what we mean by STEM and STEAM and stream as we continue in this discussion. And so I'm going to let Deanna continue with our definitions of STEM and STEAM and stream.
Excellent, yes. So we have STEM, which is a movement which basically is an acronym for incorporation of science, technology, engineering, and math, making that a priority within education at both the elementary and the middle and secondary levels. That is something that has taken root in our country, beginning really with Sputnik, but being defined as STEM and being funded very heavily and promoted very heavily as STEM really began in 2001. And believe it or not, it was first called Smut, but that didn't go very far. But
Smut doesn't sound good.
Smut doesn't. But what does STEM remind us of? Well, of course, it reminds us of growth. It reminds us of something that begins as something very small and then grows into something quite marvelous. And STEM has really done that. Then in about 2012, those people who had, actually it began before 2012, but it was quite formalized in 2012, the STEAM movement began. STEM plus A makes STEAM, and the A stood for the arts, which, as Katie will tell you, had been curiously eliminated.
Conspicuously not included, especially when you're talking about engineering, science, mathematics, those kinds of problem solving, like, I guess there's some creativity and artistry involved in here, right?
What do you think, Leonardo?
Yeah, what do you think, Leonardo? Or, hey, Edison, did you get that light bulb working yet? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Marie, could you please,
give me some more radium?
And can you stir that pot while you're at it?
Yes, please.
So, anyway, we don't mean to disparage these movements. In fact, we both believe that the STEM and the STEAM movements have transformed education, and in a very good way over the last 20 years at both the elementary and secondary level. And we know that there are multiple ways that it has transformed education, but we're just going to name and focus on 5 of them that we think have made the lives of students and teachers so much better. And the first one we really believe is quite obvious is the fact that the STEM and STEAM movements have brought hands-on active learning into classrooms and replaced test-taking. That is one thing that we believe, that a product orientation, the idea that students can have an achievement other than having figured out one right answer, is an extraordinarily important and obvious transformation in education.
And so can we have an amen? Amen! Yeah.
Amen.
Okay.
Now, Kate can tell you about the way that it actually promotes interdisciplinary work.
Yeah, and so the idea between science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and art is that, it creates an interdisciplinary aspect of learning. And what we know more and more with 21st century learning is that, it really is about teams. And I'm thinking right now about a project that I'm doing where I'm redoing my whole Engaging Learners website. And the first onboarding meeting that we had, there were 6 people on the conference call with different aspects: technical, branding, product development, everything. And this is really the way the world is, especially with technology as a vehicle to articulate, define, and as a tool to address technology, engineering, mathematics, phenomena, projects, questions.
And I think that's quite notable because even, we're not that old, but I have to say that when I was in secondary school, I didn't imagine that people that were creative in the math and science arenas and in the arts would be in a room even talking to each other about anything.
Yeah, and we're not that old. We're over 50, which is the new 20, right?
That's right. But when you think about it, that we were brought up in kind of a time of a false dichotomy. That there were artsy and creative types, and then there were math science geeks.
Exactly.
And that's gone now. And actually, we're preparing students for that understanding that it's a collaborative community. So that's the second piece that we think has really been done well. I think the third component that STEM and STEAM has brought into the classroom, getting back to that idea of active and hands-on learning, is honoring the need for movement, physical movement in the developing human body, and particularly how that impacts the adolescent brain. And Kate can say a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that's several neuroscientists, including John Medina's work. A wonderful book, Brain Rules. RULES, I highly recommend. And we know about how critical movement is with the little guys, but we're finding out more and more about the adolescent brain and how it's developing, how necessary that is as well. And we tend to just want our middle school, high school kids to sit in desks and be compliant. And actually, they're going to learn more effectively with movement. And when we do professional learning workshops, when Deanna and I are working in schools and working with colleagues, we have our colleagues move as well. I mean, could you imagine sitting at a presentation with the two of us, just talking at people on a Friday afternoon for 3 hours straight? I think I'd rip out my toenails.
It's actually hard for us to sit on the couch for 15
minutes.
Yeah,
exactly. And do the podcast. Exactly. and just so our listeners know, I'm sitting in Deanna's house in Ipswich, Massachusetts, and everybody has like their own little projects, like every educator does. And her project in the last year, I guess, is she's got a herd of sheep. I'm not kidding. She's got like Shetland sheep, and she just like what is it? You did the fleecing, right?
That's flock. Katie.
Yeah, flock. Oh, I'm sorry, not herd. It's flock. Okay, says the city girl who grew up in Chicago. But all right, back on task. Right?
Okay, me and my pack of sheep.
Yes. So if you hear a bah in the background, that's what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. So, getting back to this need for movement, though, as we know, it's sunk into our neuroscience. It's sunk into our basically our evolutionary heritage as hunter-gatherers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But in any case, we know that when kids are running around with test tubes, when kids are running around with robotics pieces, when kids are running around doing dramatic exercises, they are learning in a very positive way. And again, it gets away from that sit in the desk, take the test, and prove your worth. Now, the fourth piece that we believe that it really has done to transform classrooms is that getting back to this development of intelligences, that it really appeals to multiple intelligences. We know about how our gardeners work in multiple intelligences. That's entered just the cultural discourse. The idea that you are offering the opportunities for kinesthetic intelligence, for spatial intelligence, for interpersonal intelligence to develop. And getting back to what Kate said before about there being multiple opportunities for a right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. The expression, there's more than one way to get to the roof, right? And with the kind of focus on standardized testing and such, the answer is always C, right? But we never really get into why it might be C, or actually why it could be A, B, or D, or whatever. And I'm thinking in particular of my good friend Richard Cash, my colleague, who I also fondly refer to as my work husband. His expertise is in gifted and talented, and he has shared with me many, many times. I've learned a lot about gifted and talented from Richard, and one of the things that he talks about is that gifted kids in particular, when they're given multiple choice standardized tests, they'll sit there and try and figure out how every single answer is right. And of course, that's not what's really being asked for on the test. So when we have these things as project-based learning and more collaborative learning, when we start implementing that in classrooms, when I'm working with colleagues, the things that they tell Deanna and me all the time, or Deanna and I all the time, is it Deanna and me or Deanna and I? Boy.
It's us.
Us. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Is that they're really kind of shocked by the roles that different kids play. And it really bubbles up to the surface individual strengths that kids have that they may not be able to showcase in a more traditional setting. So it's really inspiring. It's really exciting.
Exactly. Yeah. And to see kids who have not lit up when they have been given traditional tasks, who are suddenly given a creative and a technical or a task that brings in their spatial intelligences that they haven't been able to show in other venues, it's a confidence booster as well as just a genuine learning booster. The last piece the last benefit that we'd like to just point out
that we identified,
absolutely, is, I guess, best evidenced by the introduction of robotics engineer Barbie into the cultural mainstream of the last 2 weeks. We now have a Barbie who actually aspires to be a robotics engineer, and she teaches coding. Now, how could something like that happen?
And she's got a fierce wardrobe, too. That's the other part, right? Is that you can be a robotics engineer and have a fierce wardrobe.
Although I got to say, the way that they have her dressed, it's pretty nondescript. It's like she goes to work and she goes home and I guess she basically has to enter a sort of an expressionless world in order to become a robotics engineer. But
here's the most important part of her wardrobe. Does she have a pocket protector?
I have to say, it sort of looks like they made her like she might have a pocket protector. I haven't been able to examine her
we'll have
personally.
to. So if any of our listeners know, would you check it out and let us know if she has a pocket protector on her robotics engineer
but all the
outfit,
things that we're pretty excited about robotics engineer Barbie, because what that shows is that the idea of young women in technology has not just become accepted, it's become very marketable. Mm-hmm. And it's marketable because we have brought young women into comfort levels with technology and with science, and we've also brought young men into a space where they can be comfortable with young women in technology. And it's provided space for both genders to explore and create together, and it allows that rich environment for collaboration that isn't just about the kind of collaboration that adolescents tend to want to get into.
Just healthy and inclusive, right?
Exactly.
And, let me add, too, in addition to Robotics Barbie, I was a Girl Scout troop leader for over 10 years and really involved in my local chapter of Girl Scouts. And Girl Scouts of the U.S. has a very large STEM initiative to encourage young women to go into those fields. So, in addition, an organization like Girl Scouts, empowering young women has that aspect as well, is included, embraced STEM, STEAM within their programming.
That's right.
Yeah.
So here you have two trained in English teachers praising the STEM and the STEAM movement. We are very happy with what it's done. And yet, we do know that in certain environments, it is very limited. And Katie's going to talk about the problem a little bit.
Yeah, so the problem, with transfer, it's that it's not a panacea. I'll see like a STEM program or a charter school saying, "Hey, we're STEM or STEAM or whatever," and it just goes as far as the name of the school or what's on the brochure. And so I want to really emphasize the role of reading that has to go in with understanding science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's conspicuously absent from our discussion about STEM, STEAM, and that if we don't have solid reading skills, if kids don't have a strong flexibility with reading, then the STEAM initiative, I question how successful it can actually be. So kids need to see in classrooms, they need to observe their robotics teacher reading about robotics and such, and how they go about that and how they glean information about that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, but let's just
That's the preview. That's the teaser.
The preview for what we're saying is we need an R in there.
We need an R.
We need an R.
With a capital R,
and
not a little
needs
r.
to be in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. So we are going to take stream. We're going to take STEM and STEAM, and we're going to add an R, and we're going to get stream. So, having said that, we need to put the R into STEM and STEAM. I'm going to hand it over to Katie here, who is going to review with us the basics of adolescent literacy and remind us of some of the things we've talked about in other podcasts, as well as her research work that helps us understand how adolescent literacy, different and transformative in a way from basic literacy, moves students towards self-directed learning.
Right. Okay. So there's 4 components of reading, right? Alphabetics or phonics. With phonics, we always say alphabetics because phonics can be sometimes an edgy term. Fluency, which is the rate at which you read, comprehension, and vocabulary. So when we're working with older kids, it's not to say that alphabetics or phonics and fluency are not still part of the equation, but really the emphasis is on comprehension and vocabulary. And what we know from a lot of adolescent literacy researchers and just reading researchers in general is that your background knowledge has a huge impact in your comprehension, right? And also when we get into more technical texts, like we find in mathematics and engineering and science, the Lexile score actually goes way up. Some of the highest Lexile scores you'll see are in things like popular mechanics or Scientific American. And that's because there's so much vocabulary being introduced. There's a lot of high level, or as Marzano would call it, tier 3 vocabulary that's introduced. So what's really critical is for kids to have models. They need lots and lots of models of people who are content discipline experts in their field and demonstrating and modeling how they read a math problem, how they read a science article, how they read a robotics manual, how they read a article from Scientific American and able to integrate it into real life problems or something that we're specifically addressing in our curriculum. And that's really critical, what we're getting into, and that also is the catalyst for the movement towards more self-directed learning, more independent learning. So if we look at the current standards, whether your state uses Common Core or Texas has their own standards, Indiana, and other states, that every single one of them focuses on the critical importance for kids to have the skill set so that they can be more independent learners.
And that's a great place, I think, to think about how it is that this higher order literacy, not just necessarily being able to digest what's given to you, but actually to go to seek, to find, and to perhaps share with others, is the kind of literacy that we're talking about that plays such a huge role in STEM and STEAM. I like to think about it in terms of evolutionary psychology a lot. I think that we are still fundamentally a hunter-gatherer species. Even though we've become agrarian, even though we've become industrialized, the bottom line is that we still love to seek, and we love to find, and we love to share when we found something that's particularly tasty or that's particularly useful. And that hunter-gatherer instinct, I think, particularly emerges in adolescence so strongly. It's one of the reasons why kids are restless. It's one of the reasons why kids are fidgety. Why it is that, again, that idea of trapping them in a desk and requiring them to sit still is almost a physical as well as a psychological form of punishment. That we want to be moving about, we want to be finding. And intellectual hunting and gathering is really what makes Homo sapiens what it is.
Yeah.
So that is something that, again, as Katie just articulated, a teacher modeling and learning and showing a student how to read critically, how to go down a rabbit hole. And when we use that term, going down the rabbit hole, we use it so pejoratively when we're talking about, say, as a time-wasting idea. But actually, it's interesting to think about this. When Alice follows the rabbit down the rabbit hole, she makes an active choice, and she enters a wonderland. She does not get lost. She actually engages very actively in seeking and discovering. So when we say go down the rabbit hole, it is a portal.
It's a portal. It's not an abyss.
And it's something where you're being drawn, not necessarily where you're getting lost. And so, in any case...
Of course, we have to have a literary reference in there,
We have to have it.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
have to.
But let's not forget, Lewis Carroll, what was he? A profoundly talented mathematician.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh, absolutely.
That's an awesome bit of trivia.
Oh, absolutely.
He was a STEMmer back before it was called STEM.
Oh, he was a mathematical genius.
Oh.
And yes, and Alice
did not know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Alice was his friend's daughter. Okay, in any case, we have that idea of what it is that needs to take place. And we also know, finally, too, that we have kids that go down those rabbit holes because they have such extreme interests in these areas. They have such an interest in all things tech, not just as objects they can own, and not just objects that we use to sort of talk about each other. We talk a lot about how students are so hooked into social media, but they're not just using it to gossip about, bully, and bash each other. They are building subcultures within that social media. They're building subcultures around things like robotics. They are building subcultures around maker spaces. They're building subcultures and meeting spaces for themselves for people who are interested in theater, who are interested in all different kinds of arts movements as well as technology. And they're involving themselves as the agents in that, even when we're not telling them to, and sometimes especially when we're not telling them to. So how do we capitalize on that?
Yeah, so one of the things is that, in our classrooms, we think of it all the time with ELA teachers, but also in our technology, technological courses, mathematics, engineering, of making sure that we have resources for reading and time. And I always joke that time is the 4-letter word of education. Mm-hmm. We never have enough time, right? But kids really need that opportunity to read and research and discuss as part of the process. And many of you know that I use centers quite a bit with middle school and high school. Imagine if you had a center, let's say that the kids are looking at a STEM question, and you have one center that's for reading different articles on the subject, another one is research, and then having discussion, like how you're going to approach the problem and develop a plan. So those are the kinds of questions, and we just need to give kids those access to those kinds of materials. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I want to say too is that I've worked in undersourced schools. I work in a lot of undersourced schools, so I don't want folks to think that just because I don't have this enormous book budget, how am I going to be able to do it? So necessity is always the mother of an invention, right? So I'm sure many of you have, school libraries, public libraries that have relationships with your district or school, and start teaching kids to go online and to start looking for really sound, effective articles, or pieces, texts that are on those subjects. And most of us have access to some kind of computer in our classroom, or a limited amount.
And let's face facts, every kid's got a cell phone in their pocket.
And that was the next thing I was going to say too, is I've been in lots of classrooms where the cell phone, because kids have the portable technology, they've been using those kinds of things. And that's not to say that it isn't ideal. It absolutely is not ideal. But how do we start getting at this without throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Right. How do we work with what we have?
Yeah, we have to. Yeah. And if it were up to me, I'd be like Oprah. I'd give everybody a car. And an unlimited Amazon account, so everybody could buy whatever they needed for their classrooms. And it's a frustrating thing, but I do want to address that reality that many of us face in classrooms.
Yeah, and absolutely. Katie brought up the idea about magazines such as Popular Mechanics and Make Magazine and other places that are actually really targeting an adolescent market at this point. I don't know if you've picked up Popular Mechanics lately, but it's quite rad in terms of the way that it presents itself. And it is these are markets where you might actually be able to get back issues. You might be able to actually capitalize on sort of a backlogs or other pieces, so that perhaps actually, you're really promoting the magazine's use in your classroom, and you might find that as a way of enriching the classroom. But having those pieces in your environment sends the message to kids that it's okay to sit down. In fact, it's a good thing. Sit down and take some time to really think and research something that interests them personally. And of course, we talked about the role that personal interest plays in literacy. So that's one piece. We have also, I guess, another thing that happens in a classroom where STEM is actually used in a way that actually encourages reading. And we should say there are numbers of great classrooms and schools where these are components of their STEM and of their STEAM approach. We're not making this up and saying this is a manifesto of what should happen. We know this does happen in very successful STEM and STEAM
We're
schools.
promoting it. Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the things that it does is that in those environments, you're giving students the opportunity to learn, and then you're giving them the opportunity to instruct potentially and share what they have discovered. And again, getting back to that hunter-gatherer, look what I found. Look at how I can improve the community, or look at how I can help solve this problem. You're giving them the power to lead. You're giving them the power to seek information, to present information, and to collaborate with others. And you're giving them the power to make intellectual activity something that's very normal.
And seeing their purpose in the world.
Absolutely.
And teaching the skills is really the key to that, right?
Yes, absolutely. You talked about it earlier, Katie, about how important it is to model as a teacher yourself, whether in your subject expertise or in your personal hobby. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to my kids about what I've learned today about sheep. I'm not an expert by any means about it, but actually having found there are so many opportunities for information that is out there for me to harvest and to present and to say, gosh, this is interesting to me. It's good modeling. And I find kids doing the same thing with me when they realize that I have a low threshold for boredom.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, too, is that, let's not kid ourselves either, is that our students are doing it already. They're already going on the internet and researching. Kids know more about Minecraft and Fortnite than I think I ever will. So, they're already doing it. So how do we transfer that into our classrooms?
Yeah, and I think that the perfect opportunity is besides through, of course, your traditional subject matter. Every piece that is involving interdisciplinary STEAM and STEM and STEAM work and research is an opportunity to encourage reading, to encourage self-directed agency in students where they are seeking, finding, and sharing information. And that's really what higher order literacy is about. So
it's the secret sauce.
This is the secret sauce. And the secret sauce for us, you notice we use the metaphor stream and the acronym stream. There's a power.
There's got to be a metaphor because we're the two lit ladies, right? So we had like a textual literary reference. Now it's time for the metaphor.
Well, think about it. STEM took off because it wasn't Smut. STEAM takes off because STEAM makes perfect sense, this idea of bringing energy, and it plays upon steampunk. We love the metaphor as well as the acronym STREAM because it really introduces the idea of the aqua vita. Okay? Think about what water does for a STEM. Think of how it enables STEM to grow. Think of what STEAM is dependent upon in order to build energy and power. It's the water. Okay? And in a sense, the stream that we are asking that teachers and education professionals allow into their STEM classrooms and cultivate is going to be giving the students the agency that they will need to be effective collaborators and inventors and leaders in their work and in their creative pursuits. Reading is the source. It is the aqua vita.
Amen.
It's the aqua vita.
No, reading is definitely the it's the catalyst for everything.
Reading is what enables students to move from being good replicators of the information they're given to becoming true creators.
And I love that. it's not about replication, it's about creation.
Yeah.
So we gave you a lot to think about, and we're going to go back and start feeding the sheep, I think, and chasing them back into Deanna's yard.
Who need water, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll feature the sheep at some point in a promo coming up for Two Lit Ladies, because it's just... it's just the opportunity is too rich.
Absolutely.
So signing off on our podcast, Steam plus R equals Stream, I'm Katie McKnight.
And I'm Deanna Gallagher.
And we are the Two
Lit
Ladies.